They just kind of put you through the ringer. You'd show up at a jazz gig, the piano player who was the MD would just start playing. He wouldn't tell you what song, he wouldn't tell you what key, he wouldn't tell you what form, he wouldn't tell you where in the form he actually started. He just expected you to listen and figure it out and play.
And also to hear about the salary, because that's something that everybody cares about. Every musician cares about, every performer on board cares about.
For me, it was always about, if I want professional level players on our stages, I have to advocate for professional level salaries.
And so it's nice to hear that from the other side, right, that there was a lot of work being put into it.
Talent is not cheap. It's expensive to get the right people to do the right thing at the right time.
They don't really see that fight being fought, right?
And once the opportunity comes, you have to be, as a performer, flexible and professional and engaging as possible. You never know day to day what's going to change. And cruise ship world is very different than land-based world. Storms, port closures, emergencies. So flexibility and professionalism are absolutely required. If you're not a person who can handle last-minute change like that and be very flexible and adaptable, you're going to struggle. Live entertainment is becoming more and more the thing that you can't get without going to see it, right? Yeah, and that's what I think musicians need to lean into, is if you weren't there, you missed it.
Well, hello everybody. Today is the very first episode of the LimeCast, which is our very own podcast with a Lime twist, specifically a series where we bring in experts to talk about the cruise industry, their personal experience, trends they're seeing, advice for performers looking to work on ships, and more. And our very first guest is none other than Franz Mehrfert. Hey, hi, Franz.
Hey, how is everybody?
Hello. So glad that you could be with us today in the studio.
Thanks very much.
And so if you don't mind, we'll start, with a bio for you so everybody knows who we're talking to. All right? Okay. So without further ado, Franz Mehrfert is a professional bassist, bandleader, music entertainment manager, and music educator with a dynamic career spanning North America and beyond. Originally from Canada, now based in LA, Franz holds a Bachelor of Music degree in double bass and musicology from the University of British Columbia. He's performed internationally on cruise lines throughout Canada and the US, including as bassist on the first national tour of the musical Nice Work If You Can Get It. Franz performed and recorded with a variety of artists, including Dee Dee Daniels, Loma Luft, Adrian Jamed, Tommy Banks, The Platters, Air Supply, and with champion piano entertainer Ryan Ahern for his 2018 and 2020 PBS in-concert specials filmed in Las Vegas. Franz also managed music entertainment operations for Princess Cruises as senior manager of music direction and licensing from 2015 to 2024, overseeing all aspects of live and recorded music on board, and now works as an entertainment consultant. Whether on stage or in the studio, Franz is committed to supporting students and artists alike in bringing their musical visions to life. So again, Franz, thanks so much for being here with us today. And if it's okay, we'll get started with the question about you, which is,
right.
How did you get started on a career in the cruise industry?
Great question. Well, and that takes me back to 2002, 2003. I'd been teaching high school music programs in Canada for about 7 years. Prior to that, I'd been an orchestral bass player, and I was freelancing still as a musician quite a bit in Canada. But I wanted to change careers, do something different, get out of the teaching world for a bit, and got a gig through an agent who, I auditioned. Oddly enough, I'd be bringing in cruise ship musicians as clinicians into my classroom teaching environments to teach kids things about the saxophone or the guitar or playing jazz. And they always kept saying to me, you'd be a great musician on a cruise ship. So finally I thought, well, you know what? Let's give this a shot. So I researched a couple of agencies. I found one that I was interested in, sent that agent my stuff, and they said, sure, let's see what we can do. That was like in April or May of that school year. And so I still had, a few months to go. I had a summertime gig at a summer music program I was working at as well. And I didn't hear anything back. And the school year was coming to an end. And I was like, well, if I don't get a gig on a cruise ship, I'll do something else because I just needed a break from teaching. And lo and behold, like literally right at the end of the school year, when I was going crazy as the grad coordinator, finishing all my classes, doing my final concerts, cleaning up my band room, putting all the ukuleles that I use with kids in the elementary school away, I got a call from the agent and an email that said, "Hey, I got you a gig. You're going to go out on a Norwegian cruise line in August." And I was like, "Great." And my family thought I was nuts. I had 9 weeks. That was my first gig. 9 weeks on the Norwegian sky, and that's where I met some really great people. John Wolfenden, who's a band leader, very very talented drummer who I've worked with for years. And yeah, that was my first foray into the world. I got on the ship in Seattle, sailed to Puerto Rico, flew home, and at the meantime worked with my agent to get more, and that led me to contracts on Royal Caribbean, more on Norwegian, Celebrity, and then eventually a transition over to Princess. So it was a bit of a shot in the dark and a bit of a going out on faith. But what I learned very quickly is the minute you put your energy into that, you will get called. It's just a matter of time. If you're a solid musician, if you know what you're doing, if you're ready for it, you will get a gig. You just have to trust that there's a spot for you. And whoever it is or however you're connected to the industry, as long as you keep yourself open to the opportunity, it will come.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a similar story when I started, which is just kind of spur of the moment, went an audition for the folks from Carnival in person. And I think there's quite a similarity in terms of how quickly it happened for both me and for you. At least in the time between the call and the it's
The
time for you
audition.
to go out and
Yeah.
yeah and join the ship. And I think there's probably a wide range in terms of folks who are kind of doing it on a whim versus folks who kind of throw it out to some different agencies and then just let it sit and
Yeah.
maybe have other projects they're working on. And then folks who are determined to do this gig and who are kind of almost single-mindedly focused on figuring out ways to break into the industry. So many different stories that I feel like, you know, can be your own in terms of starting from some background on land and then ending up on a ship.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes it's actually kind of nice to get that fast call and then you're like, well, like this is what's happening, this is what I'm going to do. And other times it's great if you have other work lined up and you're able to plan for it
Yeah.
and 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 kind of spend a lot of time working towards, you know, the eventual stepping on board. But I'm wondering for you, like the first time you got on board, so on the Norwegian Sky, was it?
Yeah, the old
And
Norwegian Sky, which it
yeah,
became another ship, the Pride of Aloha, I think, and then came
yeah.
back to being the Norwegian Sky. And I think now it's being sold or has been sold to Cordelia Cruises. It's going to go sail over, be remodeled and sail over in India.
Sure. But like that ship that was doing that Hawaii run, like the kind of that was like its sole purpose was to do that itinerary right at the time.
That was actually the Pride of America. It was a special built ship. And they had a few different ships that were doing that program for NCL at the time. It was brand new and there was going to be mainly an American crew. But when I joined the Sky, it wasn't that. We did a couple of runs up to Alaska, and then we went from Seattle down to the Panama Canal, stopped in Acapulco when ships were still going to Acapulco.
Sure.
But it's funny. Like I showed up in Seattle and I had way too much stuff, like way too much stuff.
Yeah.
I brought a rack case with my compressor and my preamp and my this and that and the other thing. And the band leader looked at me and was like, "What do you just bring a cable and your bass? What do you need all this stuff?" So I
Yeah.
learned very quickly for my next contract, yeah, you be very, very mindful of what you think you need versus what you actually need when you get on the gig. And it does depend on the cruise line. Some cruise lines want you to bring more of your own equipment or are welcoming that, pedal boards, sound modules, etc. But a lot of times as a musician, you need to bring the bare minimum to get on the plane if you're not driving to the ship and
Right.
get to the gig.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
I learned quickly to
yeah,
minimize.
such a learning curve in terms of figuring out what to pack from first contract to second contract. But I was
Yeah.
going to ask, what what was your initial experience? Like, did you have a great time? Did it take you some time to adapt to the gig at sea, or was it right away just like this is a great fit for me, and I want to do more of these?
That's a good question. It was actually a very challenging contract in a lot of ways. The reading side of it was fine. As a reading musician, I loved it. I was fitting in right in. I was playing with some great musicians. We were having opportunities to play some jazz. But the environment on Norwegian at the time was quite restrictive. If you were a musician who was not a guest entertainer musician, but one of the staff, you had some very very strong restrictions in terms of where you could go on the ship, when you could go there, how you had to dress. You didn't have passenger area privileges like you did on other ships that I worked on later on. You ate in the crew mess or the staff mess. You didn't get an emergency duty until you earned it. You had to go through a series of courses and demonstrate that you were capable of putting out a fire and flipping over a life raft and all of these things that you had to do as part of your training. And then you were given the opportunity to have an emergency duty. Whereas on most of the other cruise lines, it's expected the minute you show up, the very first thing you're going to do is take on that emergency duty. So at the time, NCL had a slightly different approach, and I'm not sure if that changed since, but
It
it
actually,
was
I was going to say, it sounds like a pretty good deal to, if you just pretend that you're completely incompetent, then you'll never get a safety duty, and you just go
well,
back
no,
to
that
your
you
bed.
unfortunately
Not to
no,
tell
because
people that's what to do.
no, because at the time it was understood that if you didn't pass and get the
So
emergency
they're
duty,
just getting you off the ship.
they wouldn't keep you on board. But you ended up actually with the staff captain having an interview to go over what you learned in all your emergency training courses to make sure that you
Sure.
understood it all. And
Yeah.
NCL took it very seriously at the time. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing was that on that first experience, because we didn't have passenger area privileges, we hang out with all of the crew. So I got to know folks, and I was in the training courses with folks from all over the world, and you got to know folks from Poland and Ukraine and Russia, everywhere around. A lot of Eastern Europeans at the time were working at NCL, and we all were in the same programs and eating in the same places. And there wasn't really a division between the staff from one department or another. You're all just new hires. You're going through the program together, and you got to know each other and work through that. So that part of it was exciting. The challenging part was I was coming in with no real experience and understanding of what the cruise world as a musician would look like, and it was just expected from the players that were there were certain things that you just dealt with and got on with it. I didn't get a click. I'm playing a production show. I have to rely on the drummer. He's got the click. I don't have the click. So I had to write into my chart the number of seconds between songs. As I learned the show, I just had to memorize, okay, that song ends and I count, so many Mississippis and then I go because I don't get the count in. The drummer gets the count in and sometimes he counts me in. Sometimes I'm not going to get that. So it was a bit of an eye-opening situation. I remember when the drummer and I went to the MD to say, "Can't we get a splitter for the headphones so that I can get the click and he can get the click?" And his response was, "Why do you need that? He's got it. That's all you need. Just rely on your drummer. Smile. Read the chart."
Wow. Pretty intense.
It
I
was very
mean,
intense. Yeah.
a a great learning experience, but pretty challenging even for musicians who would be good for the house band gig to
Yeah.
have to
And there's a
just
there's an
follow somebody
old
else.
there's an old school group of musicians who at the time there was kind of a, I don't know, what was it called, a hazing or a phasing sort of thing. They just kind of put you through the ringer. You'd show up at a jazz gig, the piano player who was the MD would just start playing. He wouldn't tell you what song, he wouldn't tell you what key, he wouldn't tell you what form, he wouldn't tell you where in the form he actually started. He just expected you to listen and figure it out and play. And if you couldn't, then you'd get that dirty look like, you better know this song for next time in this key the way I play it. So learn it right now while you're playing it. So I got to be really quick on my feet of listening and trying to figure out what was going on around me. And That's where I think the expression, jazz musicians use it a lot, big ears. You need big ears. You need to hear what's going on in the moment musically and just jump in and fit in. And if you make a mistake, own it, say, sorry, I'll have it down for next time. But I've learned as a band leader not to run things that way. Generally, it's better if people have a set list, have the keys, have the lead sheets, if you've got all of that. And in today's world, where everybody's got iRealBook and all of the real books on their PDF viewer, whether it's Fourscore or Mobile Sheets Pro, there's no reason not to have all of that at people's fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something to be said for kind of the old school mentality of the way that I think a lot of cruise ship musicians used to operate, and kind of be given their duties, maybe in a way that wasn't the easiest to understand or the clearest or the kindest, but it certainly, I think, brought out either the best or the worst in musicians very quickly. And obviously the strong ones like you learn to adapt and then to
Thrive.
really enjoy the gig, thrive even.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's so much that we could talk about in terms of your time spent on board as a performer, but uh, how about the transition from performer on board to working
In the
in the
office.
Princess office? Yeah.
Right.
How did that happen? And if you could like walk us through what that transition was like.
Well, I'll give you a quick backstory. On that very first contract, the MD and I went for coffee in Curacao towards the
Mm.
end of my 9 weeks on board. And he said, you're really smart. You're the kind of guy that one day should work in the office. And I just kind of put that in the back of my head. And 10 years later, um, I had to take a break from shipping work for a while for a variety of reasons, family mainly. Needed to be at home. So I was in the process of kind of getting off of ships, taking a needed break, trying to actually resign. I sent a resignation letter in, but it never actually got filed. Um, so I took a break and left ships for a bit with the determination that I was going to just try to make some things happen on land. And I was here in LA. I was gigging. I got on a tour. A good friend of mine, a saxophone player, Jim Geddes, he and I connected, and he had been in my band on board. And he went to work for a company called Worklight Productions that were the producing company behind the tour of Nice Work If You Can Get It with the George Gershwin show. And I had the opportunity to audition for that. Got on that tour in the summer of, I think that was 2014. And that tour took me through to the spring of 2015. And while I was on tour, I got a message from another friend who I had worked with. He was in the office at the time, and he said, "Hey, this job has come up. You should apply for it."
Hmm.
And I did. I thought, well, I was a music manager on board Princess for about 7 of the 8 years that I worked. 7.5 of the 8 years that I worked at Princess as a bass player. And I had gone through the gamut of making all the suggestions in the world that I thought of how things could be better for the bands and the musicians and the life on board. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll throw my hat in the ring. Maybe they'll listen to me and hire me. And lo and behold, they did. So I had a good interview. I had a great director that I worked under, a lovely gentleman who I'm still very much in touch with, named Alan Stein. He's just a class act gentleman, great piano player, wonderful composer and arranger, and just a classy guy. He and I really clicked, and so that made the interview process happen very quickly. But I was pretty determined to come into the office environment and take a lot of what I had dealt with on board as a music manager and try to make some changes into the way things were handled at Princess. And because I had spent 8 years working on board at the company, I knew so much of what was going on board.
Hmm.
And so yeah, when I had that opportunity to come into the office, I really jumped at it and thought I think I did a pretty good job. I lasted there for 9+ years, and
Sure.
yeah, it was a great experience to be in the shoreside. I learned a heck of a lot more than people who are working on board always wonder. Well, why can't the office just? Well, there's a lot of reasons why the office can't just. And
Hmm.
you don't know those things until you can peel back the layers of the onion and see, oh, that's how this works. That's why this type of decision is made. That's where you can't just change where the ship is going because you've got a girlfriend you want to see in such and such a port. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's often really difficult for folks on the other side to understand what's going on just because when you don't see it yourself, you're kind of left wondering what is, what's happening, and you don't
Yeah.
see all the different variables and whatever's being discussed between the office folks and sometimes the agents and itineraries and all sorts of reasons why
Why things are the way
it
they are.
might be a lot harder to grant a request than it seems to be, or why getting an answer back takes a while.
Yeah. But I approached the job when I was in the shoreside role from the perspective of a professional musician and wanted always to treat the people that worked under my team or with my team on board as professionals and as professional as possible. And I know one of the questions you're going to ask me is what was some of the biggest challenges I faced when I was in that role. And one of them I would say, and I'm going to just preface this by answering that question, is
Sure.
musicians on board cruise industry over the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. There's a reputation that musicians and performers in general have that, and it's kind of maybe the Simon Cowell effect, right? Cruise ship work is not the same as land based performance work. And so there was this kind of looking down upon from a professional industry view, but also I think from other colleagues on board or in the entertainment industry and musicians to a certain extent, if they were not always professional on the gig, brought some of that reputation upon themselves. So there was a bit of a negative view of musicians, and I sought to change that. I think it's, as a professional musician, doesn't matter whether you're playing on a land-based gig or a ship-based gig, you show up and you bring the same skill set and the same approach to it, and you should expect reciprocal treatment in the same way. And I think it took a while for me to make some of the changes that I wanted from a shoreside operational perspective to instill that both in the musicians on board. If you want to be treated like a professional, you have to act like it all the time. And the folks that I worked with. Because I think musicians for a long time have had this kind of reputation as being slackers. What do you do all day? You just play, you sleep till noon, you go eat, you show up for a short little rehearsal, you play two easy shows that night, and you go to bed or you go to the bar. How hard is it? Well, life is, it's a little more than that once you, and it, here, you take the bass, you go play the show. And that quiets people down very quickly.
Sure. I think that negative stigma exists all across the world.
Yes.
Certainly for a lot of universities in the States where professors don't think that cruise ship work is at the level that they want for their students, for example. But in our experience, I think, certainly in mine, and I think yours as well, where we found that cruise ship work is some of the most challenging work for
Absolutely.
musicians that exists.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're on stage every night. You don't get it. You generally don't get a night off as a regular staff member. You're reading a different show regularly. You have other musicians that are changing around you, so the band that you're in is not necessarily always the same band. If you come and go as a band, okay, that's one thing. But often, if you're a house band musician, you might have a new drummer next week and a new piano player the week after that and a new guitar player the week after that. So the rhythm section player, you're constantly trying to find a way to make sure everybody gels together, and you've got to adjust the way you play to make sure that the new guy fits in well. Or if you're one of the old school musicians, you might have a negative view of that new guy and haze them to a degree that they don't like the gig. It's not a good way to go. But it is a very, very demanding job. You have to be versed in almost every single musical style. You have to read every kind of chart you can imagine at a really high level. You have to be able to improvise in any style of music that you can conceive of might be presented. And the demand of the audience, I think, and the expectation of the audience is you have to be as good as what they could just watch on YouTube. So if you're not, if you can't reproduce that both in intensity and musicianship on stage, they can just go back to their cabin and watch a concert on YouTube. They don't need to go to the theater to watch you or go to the venue to see a jazz gig. So if when you can break the barriers around all of that and be a great musician and be a great professional and always maintain that level of approach, that's when I think you will get that treatment back. And I think I instilled that to degree that I could at Princess when I in my tenure there. And yeah, it was. probably that's one of the biggest challenges I faced, was just getting people to understand on all sides, this is a professional gig and it's just as professional as a land-based gig. And in fact, it has higher demand to it than, where else do you play every single night for 6 months?
Sure. Absolutely. Even if you've got a day off, because some
Yeah,
lines do and some lines don't. But even if you're getting a day off a week, you are still performing, say you're like a guitar soloist or something like that. You're not even in the house band, right? And you're singing for 4 hours a day, or you're in a lounge band playing for 4 hours
four
a
sets a
day,
day.
4 sets a day, sometimes depending, but it's a lot of work.
It's a
It's
lot of work.
it's heavy, and it's a lot of repertoire,
It's a lot of
and there's
tunes.
usually additional demands
Yep.
that the ship places on you. Also, you're living and working in the same place, so you don't really get to leave it all behind and uh, and take a break. You're just always on. And this is
Yeah.
not to say that the point is not to discourage, I think, performers from wanting to do this gig. I think it really is to highlight the professionalism that's required to to
To have a
excel
long
on board.
career. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the kind of career that I think for some musicians, they try it and they realize very quickly that this may not be for them, right? It's if you're the kind of musician who that's not the thing that you want to be, you want to have the ability to do other projects and connect with other people, and getting out of town for whatever period of time, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 6 months in a break, is not necessarily the kind of lifestyle you want, then fair enough, right? Make that choice, try it, and move on. But for a lot of folks, it's a great way to see the world, make money, hone your craft as a professional performer for sure, and have a career, establish a career, and get to know musicians from all over the world who will then
Sure.
be part of that network that you carry forward.
Sure. And so just to kind of go back there for a second in terms of trying to like raise the bar for musicianship and for professionalism on board princess ships, like what were the different ways? I mean, obviously you wanted to kind of give it back and show musicians that like this was the expectation, and and also kind of what you were saying before about the same perspective as a band leader, where we're going to give them charts, we're not going to make it as hard as possible for these performers on board to excel. We're gonna we're gonna give them a hand because that will help them probably enjoy the gig more and want to do the gig more, even if they are at the very top of
The
the
game.
scale for professionalism. But what were some of the other ways that you tried to kind of raise the bar on board and make it clear that this is a really professional and high level gig?
Well, one thing that we did was we actually defined jobs. We When I came into the office, everybody in the music world at Princess had the same. You were either the music manager or you were a musician. And
Sure.
so everybody had the same job description. Everybody had the same end of contract appraisal. And everybody had the same job title. And I was like, this is crazy, because you had such a wide range of people doing all kinds of different things with all kinds of different expectations. Yet when you ended your contract, you all had the same sort of level of accountability, which is good, but it's not really accurate, right? So we went through a process where we defined roles differently. We created job descriptions. We created end of contract appraisals that said, okay, this guy's a musician, this guy's a soloist. This guy's a band leader. Girl's a band leader. This person's a house band musician versus a lounge musician. The music manager has a little bit more of a role to play. We created a music manager manual and did a training program and created training roles for band leaders to be able to step up. So there was a lot of back of house things in terms of how HR side of it was organized that I needed to do as a manager from the shoreside operational perspective, so that our HR systems that we worked with could understand why this musician who's a band leader of a lounge band is paid this much and has this kind of an appraisal and has these expectations placed upon them. And when I call their agent and talk to them about this person, I'm talking about this versus this other musician who's just a solo piano player who just shows up and does this part of the gig. And trying to sit down with HR people, if everybody's just a musician and that's the only bucket everybody falls in, they are confused as crazy. They just don't understand why would you do that. So that was one of the big changes we had to make. And once we did that and defined roles and gave some nuances, yes, it added layers of complexity, I suppose, to the staffing view. But what it gave is people the ability to say and take ownership of this is the role I have, this is what I'm going to be held accountable for. And when I'm interacting with other people on board, they understand if my title says featured soloist, that means something different than musician or band leader or house band musician or assistant music manager or music manager. So was that a big change? Well, it was a big change to make because I had to do all the legwork with my team to define those things and define salary ranges and job descriptions and do competitive benchmarking across the industry and make the case that this is why we want to do it. But what it also allowed me to do was shift the salary expectations because I then was able to say, hey, these people in this role fit here. These people in this role fit here. These people in this role fit here. And as inflation goes up, the cost of living increases, the salary ranges need to also shift. And we did usually every 2 years, we did a competitive benchmarking review. And I work with our compensation team to say, okay, it's time to look at what we pay people and look at how inflation has chipped away at their earning potential. And then I can justify giving people raises. So a lot of that was a bit of heavy lifting at the very beginning of my tenure at Princess, but it set the stage so that musicians understood their roles, people that they worked with understood their roles, HR and compensation understood their roles. And so when somebody came to me or an agent came to me to say, this guy needs a raise, it was way easier for me to be able to justify it instead of everybody just being a black box, one bucket, everybody's a musician, nobody understands who does what and what does that actually mean.
And Princess always struck us as one of the most organized lines when it came to even things as basic as job descriptions. You think that everybody has every line and everywhere in the industry, it's very, very clear, but sometimes, honestly, it isn't. And if that's not clear, then it raises other issues in terms of performance on board and when unforeseen circumstances come up. And so it's great to know that was something that you spearheaded
Yeah.
at Princess when you first came on, and also to hear about the salary, because that's something that everybody cares about. Every musician cares about, every performer on board cares about.
Show
And
me the
yet
money.
there were, of course, and I think at the same time, they don't really see that fight being fought, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, well, I'm paid this much. Why am I not paid more? And they grumble about it at the crew bar. This is not to say that there's a lot of performers who are super happy with the salaries that they make, but it is something that is very topical. I think
Yeah.
it's always on performers' minds. And so it's nice to
Well,
hear that from the other side, right, that there was a lot of work being put into it.
there was. And on my side, I would say even so, even more so today, there is a very, very competitive state of the industry for good talent.
Mhm.
Great performers who are really, really gifted at their instrument have so many opportunities and are so much more able to broadcast themselves to the world on platforms like TikTok and Instagram and pick something.
Sure.
You can easily make the world know about you as a performer, but it's hard to translate that into a salary on a job. And the performing opportunities for getting paid well to play live on stage in anywhere around the world are harder to come by, I would say. And so there are fewer people, I think, overall going into a performing career as a choice. Because if you think of it as, okay, I want to be the next greatest, pick a trumpet player, John Faddis, right? If you want to be the next John Faddis on the trumpet, you really have to have an affinity for that instrument because a lot of the deck in today's world is stacked against you as going down that road. Why would you want to be a jazz trumpet player because where are you going to earn money? Well, okay, yes, that's a challenge. So the people that are in it, usually that stick with it beyond high school and college and university and then go on to a professional career, there's a winnowing out of that talent base and you're left with some really high level people that can actually play at that level. And they're not cheap to get the best people. You have to spend money. You have to attract them with a salary that's competitive to have them give up whatever opportunity they might have on land to come work on a cruise ship for whatever period of time you're offering. And so for me, it was always about if I want professional level players on our stages, I have to advocate for professional level salaries. And we got there. And I think now, I think you're seeing that across the industry is that while there are cost pressures and all the cruise lines would love to have cheaper talent, talent is not cheap. It's expensive to get the right people to do the right thing at the right time. And performers that are good at what they do or great at what they do, they can command that level of pay. And they shouldn't be afraid to ask for what they're worth, but know the parameters and know how to put that argument forward is the challenge.
Absolutely. And then once you have a performer, right, that does well on board, what are the ways that you can try to kind of keep them or convince them to keep working on board aside from salary, right? Because I think one of the challenges too with this industry specifically with cruise ships is a lot of folks uh, think of cruise ships as a stepping stone, right?
Right.
So, especially if say you're a musician from the States, for example, or from the UK, where you're like, well, maybe I'll try it and then I'll go do something else. So, whenever you had to kind of talk to performers that were really excelling on Princess, and you're like, wow, I would love to keep this person here. What are the different ways that you would try to persuade folks or like make your case that like this is and maybe it's actually where you ended up as shoreside, like there's opportunities like that, but like to try to convince somebody who like likes it but they're like, well, I wonder what else is out there.
Right. Well, and there's a lot out there, so it's not an easy argument to make to somebody.
Of course.
I think of somebody who worked for me, like Derek Bomback, who was a guitar player in my band on a ship, who eventually became a music manager on a small ship. He got a taste of that. He then went up to music manager roles on bigger ships because we saw that he was really good at the job. And eventually, when there was a fleet supervisor role that came up, he was one of the people that I advocated strongly to consider that role. And we brought him in at that, and he's very effective at that. And now he's on tour playing Kinky Boots. Right, he's a
Sure.
great player,
Yeah.
and so people like that, there's ways within the system to come up when they see the opportunity, and usually it's in moving from a sideman to a band leader, moving from a house band musician to assistant music manager or music director, and then a music director role or music manager role, moving from a band leader role into sort of a music manager role. And once you're in one of those higher level roles on board, yes, then the next step is probably some sort of a fleet supervisor, fleet manager role, or a shoreside role. And there are fewer and fewer of those. Um, but I think there's those opportunities are out there. But it's showing people that there is a potential pathway to rise up through the system. It might not be at this your particular cruise line you're at today. Maybe you have to shop around and see what else is out there. But for somebody like yourself running an agency, that's not an easy argument to make to people when they've got lots of other pressures that might want to take them away. So one of the things we did at Princess was we tried to make, and I think they still do, is we tried to make it a very much of an open door policy. Listen, come work for us for a while. If you need to take a break and go do something else, go do it. If you're available to come back, come back. We'll take you. We know you're good. We know you know the product. We know you're a very effective performer on stage. So it's something that I like to see people be able to come in and out of with a little bit higher degree of flexibility. And when there are opportunities for great, talented folks to make the jump, maybe you're a house band piano player and there's an opportunity to be a jazz band leader in a quartet. Great. Let's try that person out in that category. And I've done that with a few different folks when we were launching the Take Five jazz program on a few ships. Philippe Lavoipierre, Ian Bacon, James Faherty. There's some players that made that jump from just being a house man, sideman, to leading their own jazz group because they were great jazz players to begin with. And I saw that potential in them and I pushed them to, hey, no, you need to take this on. So there's opportunities and it's changing all the time. Nothing stays static. So what's there today might not be there, a year or two down the road. But you have to, I think, have the flexibility on both sides that the shore side operational team needs to be open to having people come in and out or come in at one level and go out and come back at a different level and not hold a grudge against people for leaving because the reality is nobody can stay doing the same thing forever. That's not the way the economy of the world tends to work today. And in many, many professions, not just a musical side, people have all kinds of things that they want to do or that they have the opportunity to do. And the well placed industry folks understand that and embrace it and have the opportunity present the opportunity for people to come in and out and not be worried so much about, hey, go away and go do that tour and come back and bring what you learned onto our stage and so let's celebrate that and let's embrace that. That was my approach and I think it was successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just making it clear that people have options sometimes makes them want to take the option that is most beneficial for you too. And
Yeah.
aside from kind of making it open-ended and having people come in and out, for folks who are thinking about like a band leader or a musical director track, because that was something that you did for a long time that kind of led to kind of working your way up in the industry to then
Yeah.
become shoreside, et cetera. How did you feel like that time as a music director, as a band leader, like how did it change you? And what would you say for folks that are considering it? Obviously, it's not for everybody. Some people are very happy being sidemen for maybe their entire lives. But
Right.
if you were to advocate for that kind of growth, to be in more of a leadership role.
Well, I think nothing makes you a better player than being in the hot seat, right? When everybody in the band is looking at you to lead, then that forces you to take that role on and develop that skill set. And I think until you are the person that tries to do that, you don't know that you even have that skill set unless if you're a trained conductor, which I did when I was in university, and then I was conducting bands through all my teaching career. It was kind of a natural fit for me to go into an MD role on a cruise ship and conduct from the base. And I think I did a pretty good job of it overall. It's a lot of pressure, right? A guest entertainer comes on board. If that's the kind of gig you're in, you get a 2-hour rehearsal. You might not have seen their charts until that morning, or even an hour before the rehearsal. And the band is looking to you to count them in, conduct everything, give the cutoffs, unless everything's on click and then you say, guys, just follow the click, right? Let's get through this and see how it all goes. But if when a show's not on click and you're the person in the hot seat, it takes some time to just get your head around what that means and how you're going to do it. And as you get more comfortable with it, that skill set then allows you to be a leader in a lot of different things and not just be the MD on stage, but be the person that organizes gigs. Maybe you want to go into musician contracting. Maybe you're really great at actually creatively producing or creating new show concepts. So I think that it's a skill set that once you start developing it, it can lead you in a lot of different directions. And so that was one of the things that when I had some conversations with people considering taking on a band leader role or a music director, music manager role, is that be open to where it will take you if you are willing to flex that muscle a little bit and know that it's not just leading the band today or tomorrow. It could take you a lot farther. And people that have that experience also, when they're working with a great MD, they love it because, God, I don't have to do it. I can just follow this guy, and this guy's really good. And I will get better watching this guy or this gal do what they do as an MD, because then when I have to do it myself, I've got a really positive example. We've all played with both positive and negative examples of MDs, right? We know that there are things that work and there are things that don't work. And the most important thing is that the people on stage have to trust you. They have to trust that you are going to lead them through the musical experience. And the audience needs to trust that the band on stage is not going to, they cannot They don't want to be able to tell that something went wrong. They want it to be flawless and perfect. And that's the MD's job, is to get the band through it, and to make sure that the audience never knows the click drop, never knows we lost the mics for the horn section for five song, never knows that the drummer was 2 pages behind in the chart and just realized it when you all got to the chorus and he was still on the bridge. All of that, the MD has to just, I'm going to get you guys through it. Trust me. And that's a great place to develop a skill set and exercise some muscles in leadership, for sure.
Sure. Such a privilege and a challenge to be in
Yeah.
that hot seat. And I think for anybody who's had a great MD, hopefully they didn't take it for granted, but it can be easy to do that
Yeah.
as a side person. But to see that and to learn from it, and then to be on the other side and to be able to give that to the performers that you're working with, to the side people, is also just an incredible opportunity. At least that's how I felt. One particular MD, before I became an MD myself, said to me that the best reason to become an MD is so you don't have to work with any other bad MDs again, which
Yes.
still sticks with me, because of course, like any industry, right? You're going to have good bosses and
Yeah.
bad bosses. But if you can be that change in the world and then say, like, this is how I believe, from my good experiences and bad experiences, I'm going to take from what I liked and try to leave off what I felt was
Not
either,
good.
not good, unprofessional, just unhelpful,
Yeah.
and slowly try to make the world and make the world of like performing on ships a
A little
place
easier.
where it fosters trust, like you were saying,
Yeah.
and where
Well,
people are excited to work.
one of the other things that at my tenure at Princess, we were launching, when I first joined the office in Shoreside role, we were launching the Voice of the Ocean, which was it's passengers who are going to sing songs and be crowned the voice. They have a competition, blah, blah, blah. It's a
Sure.
really cool program, but it meant that the band had to have a body of charts that were all 90-second cuts, that we had lyrics for, that we had this whole organized thing so the guests could pick a song from the repertoire, rehearse it with the band, put it on stage, and do the show, all within the span of a few days, to be honest. Like, usually it's over a 7-day cruise, but still, you have like they do some karaoke heats. We figure out who's going to be great in the show. They have one rehearsal with the band. They have a sound check rehearsal the day of, and then they're in the show. It's a pretty tight timeline, which meant we'd have a lot of music. And you can't just do that with paper charts, because this guy over here is going to lose his binder. That guy over there is going to get coffee on his paper. No. And I don't want to have to be reprinting and taping stuff over and over and over again. So we decided we need a digital music system, digital reading system. So we created one. We worked with a vendor. Now they're called AVLX. We found tablets. We found Mobile Sheets Pro, a software program that we liked, that is now also on iPad, but at the time it was only Android. And we created a system where we could put all of our sheet music digitally into a collection and make it available and readable and usable on stage with Bluetooth pedals for turning pages. And we deployed those systems across the fleet and trained people. Graham, Derek, Steve Dart, various folks were very instrumental in helping me get that off the ground. And that was really, really critical, because it made the job of the musician easier. Here's the tablet. It has the library. We're going to give you the set list. All you have to do is load the set list. There's all your charts in order. Press the pedal, turn the page. And no one else was doing that when we started it. And this was like 2015, 2016, when we first kicked this off. And it was something that I think, as Harry Connick Jr. was the only person that had a digital music reading system for his band. And I was like, that's what we need. Well, we couldn't get what he had, but we found our own thing and it made it work.
Sure.
And now I think almost all the cruise lines are doing it, or most musicians show up with their own iPad or tablet of some form anyway, right? And they're now gotten a lot cheaper and easier to load music. There's copyright concerns and library concerns and all that stuff that you have to address. But by and large, not having paper means that you are more able to give people the tools that they need to be successful whether it's a production show, whether it's, something like The Voice of the Ocean, any of those kinds of programs that require a large repertoire of sheet music, digitizing it just instantly changed the game, where we had so much more stuff available for the musicians to play. And they didn't have to lug around these huge bloody binders of paper, which, I still have my lead sheet binder that is probably like this thick of all the jazz tunes that I love to play. And I don't carry that anymore. I have a tablet and I've got all my stuff on there that I like to play and my own charts and blah, blah, blah. And it took a lot of convincing for some people, but again, I had a great director, Alan Stein, at the time. He's like, yeah, this totally makes sense. Let's do it. And we found a way to do it and launch it. And it's, as far as I know, it's still in use on board Princess today.
Yeah. Talk about making things easier for performers on board. And some of them will never know that there was an alternate dimension where they were lugging around 50-pound books where they had to flip and find the right chart. And by the time they found it, the band leader was already onto the next chart. So yeah, one of many things.
On my very first Norwegian Sky cruise ship gig, when we had a big band set, we would all go to the venue as a band. The band leader would show up with this crate of binders or folders of the big band charts. He would have laid out all of his tunes on the piano in the order that he wanted them. And he then gave you the folder, and you had to all crowd around the piano and go crazy trying to find all the things and put them all in the order. And you had you had to get that done, because then you had to play them, rehearse them. And then you had to do the gig. And after the gig, you had to put them back in the right numerical order and hand the whole file back to the band leader. And if you didn't do that well, you got a reputation about being a guy that couldn't handle paper, right? And it's such a simple thing. Can you just give us a printout of the set list with the numbers in advance, and I can just take the binder over here and do it myself? No. You had to go to the piano. They had to be in the order. You had to all crowd around. You weren't allowed to touch them. You had to find so, the old school way of doing things, I think, thankfully, we've moved away from some of that because it was really hard. But at the same time, the expectation the cruise industry had at the time was the band leader brought all the charts. They flew with this massive library of big band stuff that they wanted the band to play, and they had ownership of it, and they had to maintain it and keep it and not lose it and make sure the guys looked after it. Thank God that we've moved away from that, because that was really cumbersome, expensive, and inefficient.
Yeah, I had the same experience when I started on ships in my 10-piece band, trying to get to the gig and then find the charts frantically and then play them without having even looked at the charts, because I didn't have enough time, because I was still playing the last one as the band leader was counting off the first tune. So certainly a trial by fire. I am glad that most musicians on board don't have to deal with that anymore, but it is funny to think about what that was like and how stressful that was before each gig. Will I even be able to find the charts, much less then read them down, hopefully.
And then you realize you don't even have a bass chart. You're reading the trombone part.
You're like, right. It's like,
what?
Gotcha. Yeah. Friends, we probably could keep talking for hours and hours. I have one more question, and then maybe we'll do a part 2, just because there's just tons and tons to talk about with this industry, and also all the time that you spent at Princess and all the experience that you have in the industry. But just kind of as a closing question, for a musician or a group that's looking to work on ships, what kind of advice would you give them if this is their goal, this is what they're working towards? What do they need to hear from somebody who's worked as a performer and then basically managed the entire Princess music department from shoreside in LA for a decade?
Well, first of all, know that there's lots of opportunities. The industry is expanding, it's diversifying, it's maturing. There's multi-gen cruising that is big now. There's health-focused cruising, wellness. There's immersive experiences that are involving more entertainment. And entertainment and music is more integrated in more places on board, more ships now in various ways. And so I think knowing there's opportunity for really great performers around the industry, no matter what. And so you have to approach it with knowing that if you're a good performer who understands your instrument or what you're able to provide, or the group that you're with is able to provide, and you've done your research and you know that you meet that standard, then it's just a matter of really finding and researching the way you can get your foot in the door. The first thing, though, is, and I tell this to everybody, is don't apply until you're ready. Because if you haven't got your passport, if you don't have your luggage, if you don't have the basic blacks that you need, or costume or shoes or whatever, you can't go out and buy. Because once you submit and the opportunity comes, you have to be ready to go. Because the minute you submit and the opportunity comes and you're not ready, you're not going to get called again. So maybe you get called again, but it's going to be much harder the second time to get that opportunity. So don't apply until you're absolutely sure you are ready for whatever it might come at you, because it will come, and you have to trust that it will come. And once the opportunity comes, you have to be, as a performer, flexible and professional and engaging as possible. You never know day to day what's going to change. And cruise ship world is very different than land-based world. Storms, port closures, emergencies, things that happen that take the ship off the course of what was planned. This guest entertainer doesn't show up. We need a different show. Who's got this? Who's got what? That piece of technology doesn't work tonight. We can't do that show. We're going to switch it with this show. Last minute schedule change. All of those things are very, very different in the world of cruise than they are on land. So flexibility and professionalism are absolutely required. If you're not a person who can handle last minute change like that and be very flexible and adaptable, you're going to struggle. So be very thoughtful about going into this and knowing that it's going to require that skill set. And if you're open to it, that's a skill set that you can then develop and be really good at last minute changes. And if you ever work in film or TV as a musician in a live radio show or TV show or that kind of thing, that's exactly what that world is the same, right? It's no different. And live touring is very much that. I mean, it's probably a little more planned out and consistent, but there's the world of entertainment and live performance is always having that expectation that things are going to go awry. Chances are, at least once, right? So if you're very flexible and very adaptable, you will do well in that environment. The other thing is that I think there's a much higher expectation now of performers to be engaging with the audience. And the day of the musician just being behind the music stand and head down and playing their instrument and focusing on the music, that kind of a classical approach to things, even in the world of classical music, I think is changing, right? There's a higher level of expectation on people being engaged with the audience and engaged with with each other as performers on stage. A higher expectation that you're not lost in the music, that you've memorized and you can play things without having to be buried in the chart as much as possible. Although, I saw the Latin Grammys, and the bass player that played with everybody, fantastic bass player. He was reading his ass off, and I could see that he was like buried in the chart because he was playing with Gloria Estefan. He was playing with this. He was playing with that. He was playing with Carlos Santana. He was reading for everybody, and I was like, "Damn, this guy's good." But I could see he was buried in the chart for some of those songs because it's probably last minute. Oh, we're doing this, and you got to read it. So, but being engaging, I think, and being really visually appealing on stage in whatever form or fashion that's going to take for you as a performer is really more important now because, like I said earlier, an audience member can just as easily go to their cabin with their phone and watch Beyonce on YouTube. They don't need you to entertain them if they want to be entertained in some way. So you have to give them a reason as a performer for them to check you out and then stay. And it has to be engaging in all kinds of levels. So the right music that you pick for the audience that you're performing to, the right spiel that you're using as banter in between songs, the way that you involve the audience and you talk to them or bring them into the performance before and after the performance, the way that you as a performer meet and greet with the audience and swan. All of those things are more important today, I think, in the world of cruise than they ever were before. Not that they weren't important before, because I think good performers did all those things anyway. But now we have a higher level of expectation, and we have digital tools that can help you with that. Help, like on Princess, they have the medallion that you can use to get to know the guests even faster and get to know who's in your audience. So using the tools that are at your disposal to bring that higher level of engagement to every single performance is important. And if you're able to do that, and you're professional and you're flexible and you're adaptable and you're ready and you're a great player, you're going to work. There's work out there. There's no doubt. And traveling the world, there are, some logistical challenges I think that certain folks will encounter based on where they're from or their nationality or their ability to get from A to B. Those are things that hopefully you can work out over time. If you're an American or a Canadian or from UK or from Ireland or from New Zealand or from Australia, chances are you're going to have no problem flying anywhere in the world, or if you're a Western European country. But English also is if you don't speak English at a high level, if you're coming from someplace in the world where that's not your native language, you're going to need to invest in being able to speak English fluently, because that is the language of cruise by and large. Unless you're working for a cruise line that is Italian based only, like Costa, or one of the Japanese cruise lines that's catering primarily to Japanese guests, chances are English is going to be the language that is spoken on board between the crew and between the guests. And definitely, as a musician, understanding the professional language we use on stage and all of the things that people say. We're going to the top, take it from the head, going to do a tag, everybody jump to the coda, we're going to, this section will be a vamp. If you don't know what those words mean, you're going to struggle. So you have to understand, in the house band world especially, what the nomenclature or the slang language is of what musicians use to talk about what they're doing on stage. So those are some of the points I would say, is if you're going to get into this world, it's 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 a lot like land-based work, but it's not. It's more challenging in a lot of respects. And for somebody coming into it from somewhere else, not North America, not Europe, they have a harder road to get to that. But I've seen some you guys have incredible Indonesian band. Uh,
Mockingbird.
yeah, Mockingbird. I was just trying
Yeah.
to think. They worked for P&O Australia, and then they came over to Princess. And there's some incredible bands from the Caribbean that have come through as well.
Sure. There's,
Yeah,
Project
just
5 from the Caribbean. And, just to kind of touch on, because there are so many things you said there that we could all kind of talk more about. But certainly, like, English skills, really important on
yeah,
board. I mean, for safety reasons and for musical reasons, especially if you're in a house band, listening to instructions from the band leader. But just in general, having that fluidity of conversation. If you're a soloist talking to guests, if you're part of a band, even talking to guests afterwards. English, absolutely really important. The idea of being ready to be called, I actually think that's one of the ways that as an agency we can help,
yeah,
because we can say, okay, you need a passport, we'll work with you, still audition with us. We'll find you a contract starting in 6 months. Meanwhile, let's get your passport, or let's get your visas, or let's get whatever you need,
yeah,
or like we'll help you with the dress with black. So that is something that I think as time goes on, at least the agencies that are focused on this can help people do this, like multiple things at the same time simultaneously. So
yeah.
like we're working on getting the right audition material or demo material for your band while also making sure that everybody is document ready. So that's something that I
Right.
think is absolutely true and used to be even more important, and is something that we can facilitate. But then what you were talking about in terms of flexibility, so important. And working on cruise ships, I think, is just the ultimate test of flexibility. Like, can you pivot, 90 or 180 degrees and perform a different show, perform a different set, perform a different song, take a request from the audience,
Yeah.
you know, sign on 2 days earlier, extend for a week. All of these things that help you become, I think, a better performer and a a better person too, because then you kind of understand both sides a little bit better. And anybody who is kind of has that flexibility and is able to bend with the conditions, I think will ultimately be more successful and be
Yeah.
happier too, instead of being very rigid about what needs to happen and the rules, and then finding out that it actually is very difficult to resist that. And the final thing that you said, which is that, or not the final thing in order, but just talking about appearance and how you emote when you play, and the way that you engage with the audience. I think in some ways this is the best a piece of advice that you can give to any performer, especially a musician these days, which is just, people listen with their eyes, and to the chagrin, I think, of musicians who are very good but don't react, who are just like, well, man, how do they even like that person? They're not even very good, but they're connecting with the audience in a different way on stage. They're moving around, they're smiling. And ideally you want both. You want somebody who's an incredible musician, but also realizes that they are performing and it is live. And the performers who can really do that. And there are certain lines too that are pushing for it more and more. Like you said, in classical music, in pop music, in the house band world, where it's so important to really kind of show that you're having a good time on stage. Show us that you want to be there. Show us that you like the people you're playing with. Show us that the music does something for you too.
Yeah. Well, and if you're the kind of person that likes watching the Grammys or Dancing with the Stars or American Idol or The Voice or any of these TV presentations where there's musicians on stage, watch the musicians. Don't watch the performers sometimes. Just like even just turn off the sound and watch the band and see what they're doing, because you'll notice that more and more they're being directed and coached and moving in the direction of being very visually engaging performers. But there's also an understanding for a lot of audience members that musicians have a certain look. They have a certain vibe, right? Geddy Lee will always look like Geddy Lee. And he will always be that kind of a bass player that you just know when you're watching Geddy Lee on stage, that's what Geddy Lee does. So being an individual and finding your own way to be a musician and to emote or connect or engage or however you want to do it, finding that comfort and that authenticity is also really important, right? You don't want to push people to be something that they're not, right? And make them feel like they're doing something fake. But leaning into that is really what it comes down to. Is if you're the kind of musician that you like to get into it and you like to close your eyes and you like to sway, okay, that's good, but don't just do that all the time, because that's not a lot of variety there. But also, the audience likes to see your eyes. The audience likes to know that you're connected to the other performers. So if you've got your eyes closed the whole time, then they don't know that. And I struggle with that. I love closing my eyes and playing jazz and just, yeah, I'm having a great time. But then I realize, oh my God, like the drummer, he checked out because I wasn't even watching him. So I need to put that into practice in my own playing, is that people like to see musicians having a good time on stage. That is the thing that sells the music more than anything else. If you look like you're having fun, if your band is having a blast, if you guys have all the inside jokes happening and everybody's having a blast on stage, the audience has no choice but to go with it, right? They're like, oh my God, these guys are so fun. Look at them. They're just having a great, great time. And it could be any music. It doesn't matter what the music is. It's just the fact that the musicians are authentically enjoying what they do as professionals, and they just emote this massive love for what they're doing as performers. Then the audience just goes, oh, I don't want to leave. And I think in our day and age where there's AI and all kinds of stuff readily available in digital entertainment, live entertainment is becoming more and more the thing that you can't get without going to see it, right? Yeah. And that's what I think musicians need to lean into, is if you weren't there, you missed it. So that fear of missing out, that FOMO that people talk about, I think musicians need to embrace that and fan the flames of that. You should be here to see my gig because you're going to have such a great time, and you're going to miss out if you don't come and see it. And I think that is still the currency of what makes a great band a great band. My wife and I had the opportunity to go see Boss Skaggs here in LA at the Disney Concert Hall a couple months ago. And his show was just so great. All live, no click, no programmed lighting. There was a lighting guy over there and a sound guy over there, and all live vocals. The whole band was just fantastic. And he was so engaging, and but he was just authentically Boss Skaggs. He still same, the Lido Shuffle, all the same songs, all the same, his voice was fantastic. And he didn't try to be anything other than he was, but the audience just ate it up and loved it because he's so good as a performer. but he's also who he is authentically on stage, that you just want to be around that. You want to suck it up and be a part of that experience as much as possible. So, and that's, I think, what sets musicians apart. If you look like you're having a blast, the audience, you give them permission to have a blast with you. And that's really what the engagement thing is all about, is enjoying it to the extent that everybody else participating in the experience has no choice but to enjoy it as well.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice to end this on, which is just, yeah, show that you're loving it and other people will love it too, whether you're on land, whether you're on ships, but hopefully on ships or wanting to get on ships and convey that same kind of excitement and joy and love for the music to thousands of guests every week.
You build an
So
audience. You build an audience. One, yeah,
build an
man.
audience, yeah, and just hone that craft and have a blast while you're doing it. Franz, thanks so much for spending so much time with us and chatting about all this. I imagine we'll do this again, just because there truly is so many topics to talk about, so specific to Princess as well as to the industry and even beyond, and so much great advice that I think you can give a lot of musicians, performers of all ages, whether they want to work on ships or not. But again, hopefully that are interested in some way, shape, or form in the cruise industry. So,
Well,
yeah.
I
Sorry.
appreciate you having me on, Sam. This is a great start for the first podcast for Lime.
Yeah.
And this is called Lime with a Twist. Is that what you're going to name it?
Oh, we could. We were thinking about a LimeCast, but we can also we can do
LimeCast.
a lime with a twist. I like it. Yeah, we can continue to brainstorm more. But yeah, thank you again. This has been really great, and I hope everybody enjoys it. Thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you with another episode hopefully soon.
Come visit me, www.franzmehrfert.com.
Yes, and yes, go check out Franz, who has lots and lots to say and is working now as an entertainment consultant. And so pick his brain. Again, thanks, Franz, for being on here, and we'll see you soon.